America is the greatest country in the world. Welcome to our special Politics by Faith, America's new space race. Today's special is about space. But it's more than space. If you can get bigger than space, it's about innovation. And it's about America leading the way once again. We've all seen this clip of SpaceX returning the astronauts that Biden left behind. We know the backstory. But this clip right here of the capsule landing in the Gulf of America, doesn't that look fake? Like, it looks fake. And there's this one video with the parachutes like rippling in the sky and falling into the ocean. And you're like, I don't know if that's real, actually. I think that's a computer-generated thing. I have pretty good AI radar. Like, I can tell if I see a video and like that's a fake video, like I'm pretty good at that most of the time. But you see these videos of SpaceX stuff, and they look not real. And it's true with all the videos that Elon posts of SpaceX launches and SpaceX landings, like with the toothpicks, like when they like just like pluck the rocket out of midair. Every time, I've seen these videos multiple times. Every time I see them, I'm like, oh, that's fake. That's not a real. How can it be? And then, just for good measure, when that capsule landed in the Gulf of America, it was greeted by a pod of dolphins. How is that possible? How is that real? When I lived in San Diego, the big joke was, because we were trying to keep the San Diego Chargers from moving to LA, so they kept building all these stadium architectural renderings. We were the architectural rendering capital of the world. And they would put out these renderings and they got more and more just ridiculous. And there was one architectural rendering that had this huge stadium with confetti and fireworks and the Blue Angels flying overhead. And it's like, what do you like? That's absurd. And I feel the same way with these SpaceX things and like the SpaceX capsule. You're like, let's throw in some dolphins. But all this SpaceX stuff, it's, as the British science fiction writer Arthur Clarke said, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. That's what it looks like. It's like magic. How's that possible? If you think about it, when the Wright brothers flew their first airplane, I bet that didn't look real either. Think about it. I mean, now we look at that, we're like, wait a minute, it's like a balsa wood with canvas. I feel like the Boy Scouts could throw that thing together, right? You look at it now. But back in 1903, that was ridiculous. That was insane, watching that fly in the air. And by the way, the distance between when the Wright brothers flew their first flight, that picture right there, and when we landed on the moon was only 66 years. That means people were alive when we couldn't fly and when we landed on the moon. We went from a few feet on a sand dune in North Carolina to the moon in only 66 years. That is America. That's an amazing thing. We went from some wood and canvas to landing on a lunar module in 66 years. How is that possible? Let me broaden out a little bit here. J.D. Vance, he spoke at an event called the American Dynamism Summit. It was a wonderful speech. It's 24 minutes. You should listen to the whole thing. And one of his main points was that businesses are addicted to cheap labor from abroad and illegals at home, and it's led, therefore, to a lack of innovation. That's what his speech was about, this lack of innovation. It's very similar to how slavery, when we had slavery, it corrupted the morals of slave owners, but it also led to a lack of innovation in slave states. Why would we create inventions? Why would we innovate? We got these slaves here who were like, okay, like this is working just fine. So we need more innovation in America. That was JD's point. Here's the close of his speech.
You could have chosen the easy path. Every single person in this room, as the president would say, you're all very high IQ. You're some of the most talented people in the United States of America. You chose to build a business right here in the United States of America, and for that I'm grateful. But the second thing I want to say is that I think you're not just building your own business. I think that you are part of a great American industrial renaissance. Whether it's the war of the future, the jobs of the future, the economic prosperity of the future, we believe that we must build it right here in the United States of America. So thank you all for building. Thank you all for building in America, and thank you all for building the kind of society that I want to raise my children in. God bless you all. Thanks for having me.
I love that. I love that last line so much. Thank you for building the kind of society that I want to raise my children. This is great. I heard that speech and really got me thinking. I grew up, my formative years were during the Iraq War. And I created this definition of patriotism that was surrounded by war. Right? That's like patriotism equals war. But I'd like to suggest that that's not complete. That patriotism should also include inventions and scientific achievements and monumental feats of excellence. And part of that, maybe the pinnacle of that, is space. I mean, transportation is a huge aspect. Like, maybe this is a silly example, but let me do it anyway. It was recently in DC. It was amazing. We brought all the kids. It was great. We had a wonderful time. And we went to the American History Museum. And we're on the way out because we just wanted to hit the highlights of the American History Museum because we got 4 little kids, so we just got to hit the big stuff and head out of here. But on the way out, we saw this little train. And it was the first steam engine in America. And it went between, not that one, yeah, guys. It was in between, the little one. That's a huge one. It was this little train, and it went between like New York and Philadelphia, or something like that. It's a little tiny steam engine. You're like, oh, that's pretty cool. And then you keep going, and it goes like the history of trains. And then you get to that thing. That picture doesn't do it justice at all. That train is enormous. It is a behemoth. And the room opens up, and the floor drops. So you like walk down this ramp to get next to those wheels there. This train is towering over you. It's enormous. And we built this nation with that train right there. And I'm just thinking, like, if you were at a train station and you saw that thing roll up to your town, like, man, things are happening. Things are happening in this country. It was an amazing feel. I'll never forget that train. And then we used to build these massive temples that we called train stations. And any city across the country had these colossal, towering, massive marble and gold buildings to welcome you to their city. That's Penn Station before we tore it down. Right? Penn Station used to be as towering and stunning as Grand Central Station. Tore it down, replaced it with Madison Square Garden and just this soul-crushing tunnels that they have there today. Someone had the saying that one entered the city like a god in that building, and now one scuttles in like a rat. Look at that. Oh. Anyway, I look forward to the American Renaissance. It's just another aspect of transportation. So I guess the next level would be airplanes, right? And now our airports are horrific. They're disgusting. Our airports are disgusting. They're shameful. You've been to LAX? It's for shame on our nation. I look forward to us building airports as beautiful temples again, welcoming people from all around the nation and all around the world to our city and to our country. We are announcing to the world that this is a special place to be. We're proud of it because we're proud of who we are. And just the next level of transportation would be going to outer space and going to Mars. Sounds insane, but man, it's possible. The American Golden Age is much more than GDP. It's a revival of all aspects of American greatness. And space, it's a frontier we won, and we must continue to dominate, not just for military advantages, but also in the name of science, in the name of invention, in the name of patriotism. We should run here because we have great guests coming up, including a astronaut. But Mark Andreessen gave a great speech. I encourage you to read it. It's called We Have to Build Again, or We Need to Build Once More, or something like that. It was back in 2020. And he talked about the lack of inventions lately, like the lack of innovation, the lack of, I guess when HBO's Westwood was filmed, they didn't go to an American city. They went to Singapore because our cities don't look good. They don't look like the future. Where's the inventions and innovations with K through 12 education? How about with manufacturing? Like, where are these massive state-of-the-art giant manufacturing factories where we can build the most stuff at the lowest price all throughout the country? Where's transportation now? Like, where's the supersonic aircraft? Where are the delivery drones? Where are the high-speed rails? Where's the Hyperloop? Where are the flying cars? And here's what Andreessen said. He said, our nation and our civilization were built on production, on building, Our forefathers and foremothers built roads and trains, farms and factories, the computer, the microchip, the smartphone, uncounted thousands of other things that we now take for granted, that are all around us, that define our lives and provide for our well-being. He said there's only one way to honor their legacy and to create a future we want for our children and grandchildren, and that is to build. And not just build for the sake of building, for the sake of consumerism. That's cheap crap from China. That's a big problem. We need to build things that matter, things that improve our lives and nourish the soul. And maybe even things that get us to space. I'll end with this. The first buildings in DC that they built were the White House and the Capitol building. The third building was the Patent Office. Think about that. Think about what our founding fathers and that generation thought of science and engineering and the importance of it when the third building they built in DC was the Patent Office. Thomas Jefferson said, "The issue for patents, for new discoveries, has given a spring to invention beyond my conception." Abraham Lincoln said the patent system changed this, secured to the inventor for a limited time the exclusive use of his invention and thereby added the fuel of interest to the fire of genius in the discovery and production of new and useful things. Springs and fires. Patent Office is in the Constitution too. That's the type of stuff that unleashes the innovation that's inside of people in this country. That is what fueled, that's what created 66 years between the Wright brothers and the moon. Space to me is, if we need to be a nation of builders again, space is to me the pinnacle of building. Now listen, we all can't be astronauts and we're all not going to be building our own rocket ships, but we all have our own chances to build in our own lives. But the question is, why did this advancement stop? Because we need it back. And we need it back in every aspect of our society. But space is a wonderful metaphor for going further than ever before. How far can we go? We'll talk with Brandon Weichert next, who's the expert on all this, and then we'll talk with a real-life astronaut. And then we'll come back with our faith angle of space. How should we look at space from a biblical perspective? We'll do that coming up next, right here on the First TV. Spread the word. Welcome back to our special Politics by Faith, the new space race. No one in the world better to talk to about this than Brandon Weichert. He's the author of Winning Space, How America Remains a Superpower. He's the senior national security editor at the National Interest and a contributor to Popular Mechanics. Brandon, great to talk to you again, brother.
Great to be back. Thanks for having me.
We talked about in the first segment, among other things, the fact that we went from Wright brothers flying on some sticks and canvas on the sand dunes of North Carolina to the moon in only 66 years, which just seems insane. But I say that to take us back to the first space race we had in America. Why did that happen? What was the reason for that space race?
Well, basically, the United States woke up in the 1950s and realized, holy cow, the Soviet Union, which had just very recently before that moment detonated their first nuclear weapon. So then, not long after that, suddenly the Soviets are surprising us again with the Sputnik satellite, which was a military operation. People forget about this. The Soviet space program was a explicitly military operation. Ours, of course, has a military angle as well, but with it being usually under the charge of NASA, that gives it a high degree of civilian priority, which is why that we were always focused on exploration first, and then whatever military benefits happened were secondary. In the Soviet Union system, it was the opposite, and that Sputnik satellite, we realized, oh my gosh, the Soviets could potentially place weapons in orbit. They could certainly have spy capabilities in orbit with these satellites. And so that's what triggered the initial space race, was we wanted to catch up and then ultimately, with the moon race, surpass what the Soviets could do in space.
How did we end up winning it? What elements needed to happen here in America that made us the victors?
Well, we had clear and decisive leadership with a vision, and that really is the result of John F. Kennedy with his famous Rice University, I think it was 1961 or 62 speech, where he announced the moonshot program. By 1969, of course, well after he was dead, unfortunately, that process had been carried through by Lyndon Johnson and then even by Richard Nixon, which allowed for the 1969 moon landings to occur. But it was commitment to cause, decisive, visionary leadership. They marshaled all those resources, shut down the naysayers, got the bureaucrats out of the way. And remember, even though NASA was a civilian organization and it did prioritize scientific exploration, as I say in my book, it was a Cold War fighting institution nonetheless. It was just using non-military means. And so we realized we lost the Soviets in the first round with Sputnik. We were going to get them on the back end with the moon race. Interestingly enough, though, the Soviets, toward the end of the Soviet Union, were actually starting to outpace the Americans in space station development. People don't remember this. They were also developing their own space shuttle, which was explicitly meant to place weapons in orbit. And they also actually did place the Almaz battle station in orbit, but it quickly deorbited, thankfully, before they could ever test it. And so there was another angle to the space race that was going on right until the end of the Cold War, and we weren't necessarily winning that part of the race either, which is why Reagan came in with Star Wars.
Okay, yeah, that's such a good point to make, because just because we won that one doesn't mean we'll guarantee to win everyone and to always be ahead. We need to always know that. One quick question on the clear, decisive leadership and the importance of that. And I'm starting to learn that and see how important that is more with this Trump presidency in many different ways, like how powerful that is. Yeah. But let's say the greatest leader in the world with the clearest vision ever came into my house and was like, Slater, we're going to go to space. He could have the clearest vision and the greatest speech of ever. I'd be like, I got nothing for you. Like, well, what can I do here? What elements do we have in America where that decisive leadership was able to be translated into actual landing on the moon?
Yeah, that's a great question. Basically, with the president focusing on that, first with Kennedy, well, really with Eisenhower, but Kennedy was the real visionary. When the president focused on that, and they marshaled all those resources, and they put people in control of the agencies related to space development who believed in the mission, that had a snowball effect. And at that time, it wasn't, I don't want to say centralization, but it was a higher degree of coordination between the civilian and military space programs than we have had since then. And that allowed for us to really bring all those resources together in sort of this perfect storm where we were able to get ahead of the Soviets in the moon race. Today, the problem is, it's not that we have a lack of technology. We have all the advanced technology in the world we could need to go to the moon and go to Mars and build space weapons and whatever else. But the problem is there is all these different groups doing their own thing kind of on their own island. We've got to bring these groups together, and we've got to have a higher degree of coordination. That's what I think the Trump revolution in space is about. That's why he created Space Force, remember. He's the guy who created it in his first term. That's because in his view, and I was advising some degree on this on the periphery, but other people as well who I knew who were much closer to Trump were saying this as well, is that, look, the Air Force was not managing the resources properly. You need to have your own dedicated U.S. Space Force branch to handle that military side of space. And then we unfortunately didn't reinvigorate NASA, but now we have SpaceX. And so my hope is that we can maybe clear out some of the bad stuff at NASA and bring in some of that SpaceX ethos, and maybe even, and I think that the current NASA nominee was himself a SpaceX astronaut. I think Isaacson is the guy's name. So the point is that we need to bring in some of that SpaceX ethos to NASA to really kind of reinvigorate it, and then partner more closely with startups like SpaceX, Bezos's Blue Origin, Rocket Lab. You've got a lot of these small startups who are doing really innovative things. They're never given the full attention they deserve because it goes to Boeing and Lockheed. These companies aren't performing well anymore, and they're bilking the taxpayer. We need to go back to startup nation when it comes to space development. Bring all those together, and you have a new space revolution.
Okay, very good. How would you assess where we are in the new space race? Who are our competitors? And are we laps ahead of them? Are we behind? Where are we at?
Well, we are still number one, but we remain a declining number one. The difference between now and the previous space races, there's more than two players, right? Previous space race, it was us and the Soviets, and that was it. Well, now the Americans have to contend with China, which is the big threat. They have to contend with Russia, which is a frenemy. They have to contend also with companies, private firms going into space, not just SpaceX. They have to now deal with all of that. That's complicating factors with FAA regulations and whatnot. Then they also have to worry about even some of these smaller countries. People don't realize India is a dominant power player in space development. They have some of the best satellite launches in the world. Brazil was, under Bolsonaro, becoming a serious power player in space. France has significant power in space. Israel is a major space player. Japan is a major space player. And so Australia, Britain. So there's multiple other countries as well now, and they're all trying to get in on the action, which is creating this real kind of competition for the best slots in orbit, and then also for dominating the Earth-Moon system, and eventually for going to Mars. And from Mars, you can then do space mining, which that is a huge budding sector. So this is very different from that first space race where it was really just about beating the Soviets. This now is we're playing for keeps. We're going up to stay up there and to dominate.
Wow. It's hard for me and maybe others. Like, I can look in the past and be like, okay, tanks, and we move this brigade here, and like, I understand. But then you start getting into space, and you said something like Earth Space Axis or something. It's like, wow, oh man, what does that even look like? Are we prepared to even operate with that type of thinking?
There are people like me who are trying to advise the government on how to conceptualize space power.
Yes.
There's a debate right now between people more on the left who tend to not want to do things in space because they worry about militarization. I'm on the decisive, what they call space dominance theory. I've been called the guru of space dominance theory, which is basically we need to get up there and take what we need before anybody else can, because the Chinese are coming. The Chinese have already said they view the moon as the South China Sea. So if you look at what they're doing in the South China Sea, how they're illegally taking territory that is international territory, they're going to do the same thing to the moon. And the moon has a lot of natural resources that are exploitable. And it's also, as I said, the Earth-Moon system. So if you think about it in military terms, whoever has the high ground in a combat situation usually has the dominant, position. They're going to win. Well, the moon is the ultimate high ground above the Earth, and all the orbits between, if you can control those at the key choke points, you basically control the fate of humanity on the Earth below. China understands this. They're developing a robust strategy of what they even call space dominance. Under the Biden regime, I was chastised when I was briefing Space Force by a colonel there. She told me I'm not allowed to use the term space dominance because it was too, quote, heteronormative, whatever that means. So, we've got a lot of digging we've got to get, out of this hole that we've been thrown into on the space sector because of the American left.
The choke point makes perfect sense. We just have to apply it the same. Like if the Houthis can shut down the choke point that is the Gate of Tears to the Red Sea, and if we talk about the need to take over Greenland to prevent the choke points in the Arctic, it's just another choke point, right, between us and the moon.
That's right. And so the key point of my book, and this is why Mac Owens of the Naval War College wrote the foreword, key point of my book was to translate the choke point theories of sea power strategy that dominated the 19th and 20th century and apply them to space power strategy. And so that's why we have terms like space dominance. If you can control the key orbits around the Earth, you can control the moon, you can dominate the Earth below, because that's the key. The high ground is always the key.
We got to go about a minute. What resources are on the moon that we could harvest?
The biggest one, well, you got titanium, you've got a bunch of different rare earth minerals, alloys. The big one, though, is helium-3. It's an isotope found on areas without an atmosphere like the moon. They think it could be used for nuclear fusion, more efficient nuclear fusion, and they think that if they can do it, they can power a city like Shanghai or New York cleanly with a canister about yay big for about 20 years without needing to do anything.
Oh, amazing. All right, we got to do it. Brandon Weichert, Winning Space. Go buy the book, How America Remains a Superpower. Brandon, great to talk to you. Oh, what's your Twitter? People can follow you there too.
At We the Brandon, and that's also the same handle for my Getter and Truth Social account.
Beautiful. You're the man, Brandon. Appreciate you.
Yep.
Keep it up, brother. Coming up next, we'll talk to an actual real-life astronaut, a man who's actually been in space. Actually, he was on the first shuttle after the Columbia disaster. How about that? Also want to mention my podcast, Politics by Faith, where we take, so in Politics by Faith podcast, we take the news of the day, whatever it is, of every single day, and we run it through a biblical lens, a biblical filter, because there's nothing new under the sun. We're going to do you can listen to that anywhere you listen to podcasts. We put one out pretty much every day. We're going to do a Politics by Faith segment coming up here in a little bit and look at space through a biblical lens as well. How should we be looking at space and the universe and the creation of it and science through this biblical lens? We'll do that coming up after we talk to our astronauts friend next, right here on the First TV. Spread the word. Welcome back to our special, The New Space Race. What an honor to talk to a real-life astronaut, Dr. Charles Camarada. He was the NASA Director of Engineering at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, and he's the author of Mission Out of Control. And I should note that his first space flight was NASA's return to flight mission, the first mission after the loss of the Space Shuttle Columbia. Sir, an honor to talk to you. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
But before we get to NASA and the future of space travel, can you help me understand the courage that it took to get into a rocket ship after what happened with Columbia? What was in your head the night before, as you walk into the shuttle, as it's taking off? What is going through your head all those times?
Well, actually, we were very well trained. We trained for about 2 years. And so we were all very calm. We know what the risks are. We know that space shuttle, you have a risk of 1 in 67 that you might not come back. We felt confident that we had new technology that can help keep us a little bit safer. And so our whole mission was dedicated to validating this technology to make sure that we would continue to fly space shuttles safely.
How'd you sleep the night before?
How'd I sleep? I slept very well. I never sleep all that long. I sleep about maybe 5 hours. And we had very, very good breakfast. And, I was on the middeck. And so I didn't have a whole lot of jobs to do. So we were very relaxed on the middeck, waiting 2.5 hours before launch.
Unbelievable. Can you speak to the people behind the scenes, all the engineers, all the scientists that are involved in these missions as well? I love what SpaceX is doing. I think they're the first I saw it, where when they have the launch, they have like microphones on the crowd, on everyone who works there, like cheering and celebrating. You're like, oh yeah, this is a huge team effort, and that's really important to know. Can you speak to that?
Sure. I love what SpaceX is doing. They're making space exciting. They're very open. Yeah. You could see the failures openly. People cheer when there are failures because they're learning from these failures. It takes thousands of people on the ground, Mike, at Kennedy Space Center, at Johnson Space Center, and around the world. The people on mission control team, our trainers, they're all on the loop. They're monitoring all the systems. They're ready to give information to the flight director to feed back to us.
What do you make, and then I'll ask you about NASA after this, but what do you make about the current crop of mathematicians and scientists and engineers? Do we have enough? Much is said about our education system in a country and STEM and all the rest. Like, do we have what it takes as like the American people to continue this space dominance?
I don't think so right now. I think NASA is seriously broken. We have some amazing people. We don't have enough. But NASA stopped investing in real applied research shortly after the Apollo program, over 30, 40 years ago. And so we've eroded this, what I call research culture. We have what we call a production and operations culture. And I think NASA needs to step back and go back to its roots.
Okay, tell me the difference between those two things.
Okay, a research culture, a research engineer compared to a really good engineer. A really good engineer will tell you what they think is going to happen, how a system is going to behave, and what tools they used. A research engineer is the person that developed those tools, did the physics-based analysis, did the testing in the laboratory, tested to failure. And so usually they have advanced degrees and they focus on research, understanding the knowledge, validating that knowledge through tests, and comparing that knowledge and competing that knowledge with other people around the country.
And what is NASA focusing on now, and what do they need to do?
I think NASA needs to go back to the way it was before it was NASA, when it was the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, NACA. We only had three small research laboratories, and we advanced the state of the art in aircraft for this country before we went back into World War II. I think we need to do that for space. We need to go back to research, teaming up with our partners in industry and transferring that research, that far-term knowledge and new technology, that breakthrough technology, so our industry in the United States can pick it up and make us the best in the world.
In the last segment, we were talking about strong leadership and clear visions and focus. Like, we're going to go to the moon, right? Like, that's a clear vision. What would be your vision for NASA? Like, what's the point? What's your objective?
I think maybe we go to the moon, but only as a foothold. I think we need to set our sights on Mars. I think Elon Musk is absolutely correct. I think NASA needs to get out of administering large space projects. Okay, let industry do that. I think we need to go back into doing the research, developing that technology, and let the people like Musk, Jeff Bezos, and others build the systems to take us to the moon if it's feasible and if it's profitable and if it makes sense.
Man, that's a huge shift. And I'm surprised, to be honest, I'm surprised about a NASA director talking about like such a major shift of what NASA is and what it should be in the future.
I think that's what it's going to have to take. We had two very bad accidents, and we had those accidents because of the culture at NASA. We haven't fixed the problem. There are still echoes of Challenger and Columbia.
Ooh, tell me more. How so?
How so? Well, we're using the same procedures to make decisions to tell us we're ready to fly when we're not. We don't have the really good researchers that are looking over and critically evaluating these technologies. Take, for instance, the heat shield on Artemis. NASA basically hid that there was a serious problem with the heat shield on Artemis when it flew around the moon on Artemis 1 with an uncrewed vehicle. They hid it from the public, and they refused to develop an independent Tiger team to take a look at it and develop an advanced heat shield. We have them on the books. We have heat shields that would have worked. NASA refused to do that.
What are the systems that are in place at NASA? How much of that is because it's a government-y kind of thing? Like, is that just the bureaucracy of it versus a more startup mentality of SpaceX? Is that the problem? One of the inherent problems with NASA?
Absolutely. When I started working for NASA almost 50 years ago, NASA was SpaceX. We were a research organization. Yeah. We failed smart, fast, small, cheap, early and often. And the technology that Elon Musk is using right now was the technology that we developed in the 70s. He's advanced it incrementally, and he's doing amazing things, but we could do so much better. And that's what NASA needs to be doing. Right now, industry could build large rockets, send human certified vehicles better than NASA, building engines better than NASA, faster, less expensive, and on schedule.
You've mentioned a couple times the importance of failing often. Speak to that if you don't mind.
Absolutely. That's what we learn as researchers in a laboratory. You fail in a laboratory and you use a building block approach. You fail smart, fast, small, cheap, early and often. Every experiment counts. You get the most information from those experiments, and that helps you to learn and discover new things. Then you take that and you use a building block approach to build larger systems. That's the way we did things. We didn't fail big and slow and stupid like we're failing now.
Yes. What would your advice be to the next NASA director that is confirmed as a confirmed position, I believe? What's your advice to this person, their mindset, their worldview they should have?
Right. Whoever gets confirmed, I would say, read my book. Come talk to me. Come talk to the older folks that were at NASA when NASA was an amazing organization, and learn how we used to do things back then, because it's very similar to the way industries like Elon Musk and SpaceX are doing things right now, only we had an advanced research organization.
Is there an American pride you feel when you're an astronaut, you're up in space?
Absolutely. When people ask me what was the most amazing thing about being in space, we were there for a very short time, 14 days. We had a very focused mission, technology we had to develop and validate for the next shuttle flights. And it was that camaraderie, that team behavior, working together on this amazing team with people on the ground, training very hard for anything that could happen to us. We had 3 near misses on our flight. We worked the problems, we solved the problems. We did an on-orbit repair, unheard of, which if we didn't do it, if we didn't repair the TPS on our vehicle, we would not have made it home safe.
Whoa. I have 4 kids. What characteristic do you think an astronaut needs to have that you would recommend we try to instill in our young people?
I would say it's that thirst for knowledge, that curiosity. We need to definitely revamp, transform our education system. We need to make learning fun. I started a nonprofit, the Epic Education Foundation, getting kids used to challenge-based learning, putting them together on teams, showing them how to get the knowledge to creatively solve these problems.
Yeah, and getting kids to want to be astronauts again, right? Like all these kids want to be basketball players or whatever. But like, I remember growing up, like that was like the idea, like that was like the pinnacle of cool thing. It was like doctor, astronaut. I don't know, do kids even want to do it anymore?
I think they do. I absolutely think they do. We still have thousands of people that apply to be astronauts. It's still a pretty cool job. I really love being a researcher. I became an astronaut. I was the oldest rookie to fly in space. I was 53 years old. I was working in research for 22 years, and I'm going back to that now. I really had a tremendous amount of joy solving complex problems. And training as an astronaut was just the cherry on the cake.
Amazing. Dr. Charles Camarda, the book is called Mission Out of Control. Go get it right now. Sir, wonderful to talk to you, sir. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks a lot, Mike. Thanks for having me.
How about that? Thank you, sir. How about that? An astronaut? Let's talk to an astronaut. Pretty cool. Coming up next, we'll do our Politics by Faith segment. Oh, I just remembered a story. We'll add it to our Politics by Faith segment when we get back here on our special, The New Space Race. Welcome back to our special Politics by Faith, The New Space Race. How should we look at space and the Bible? Well, the story I just remembered before the end of the last break was the Apollo 8 mission. This was the first mission to the moon. We didn't land on the moon, but they circled around it. When they got up there and they looked back at Earth, they recited Genesis 1, verse 1 through 10. The 3 astronauts took turn. There actually is a copy of the flight plan with Genesis 1, 1 through 10 written on it. And it's at one of the observatories in Chicago, so you can see it. Isn't that amazing? The Bible and space. Any scientist in the world will tell you that the greatest scientist in history was Isaac Newton. And one of the most fascinating parts of Isaac Newton's life is that he was a Christian who spent most of his time studying the Bible. Most of it. All the incredible amazing he did, most of his time, he was a theologian. And theology is like everything. Like there's this idea today that you have to be a scientist, you have to be an atheist. That's a new idea. I love this post. I just saw it the other day. Someone said, is there a secret science that bridges all science together? And someone wrote back, yeah, theology. And that was what Isaac Newton knew. Just some quotes of his. He says, gravity, that's the quote, that's the site or the picture. Yeah, all those sciences bridged together by theology. Some Isaac Newton quotes. He said, gravity explains the motion of the planets, but it cannot explain who set the planets in motion. He said the wonderful arrangement and harmony of the cosmos would only originate in the plan of an almighty omniscient being. This is and remains my greatest comprehension. In Principia, his most famous work, he said the being governs all things, not as the soul of the world, but as Lord over all. The supreme being is a being eternal, infinite, absolutely perfect. And from his true dominion, it follows that the true God is a living, intelligent, and powerful being. This is Isaac Newton. Oh, but scientists are atheists. Oh, you believe in man up in sky, imaginary man? Yeah, so did Isaac Newton. He is not eternity infinity, but eternal and infinite. He is not duration or space, but he endures and is present. Isaac Newton's objective was to get people closer to God through his science, to see more of God. He said, when I wrote my treatise about our system, it's like solar system, I had an eye upon such principles as might work with considering men for the belief of a deity. And nothing can rejoice me more than to find it useful for that purpose. He wanted men to see his science and to see God. Isn't that amazing? And I believe it's true for all science, but space too. The more you study space, the more you believe in God, the creator, which is why our Apollo 8 astronauts read Genesis 1. They didn't read the Big Bang. They read Genesis 1. People ask this question, where did God come from? Where did he come from? But God is not affected by time, space, or matter. Think about it, time, space, matter. All three of those things have to exist at the exact same moment. They have to begin and come into being in the same moment. If you have matter, but no space, where would you put it? If you had matter, but no time, when would you put it? So think about it, they all have to exist at the same time, and the Bible accounts for that. The opening line, in the beginning, time, God created the heaven, space, and the earth, matter. Time, space, matter. God created them, therefore he's outside of them. The God who created the universe is outside of the universe, and he created all of it. I encourage you to read two books. One's a secular book. It's called Brief History of Nearly Everything. And it has amazing stuff in there about the scope of the universe and the size of the universe and how many thousands and thousands of years it would take you traveling at the speed of light to get to Pluto. And that's just the outside of our solar system. And there's millions of solar systems. It's crazy to think about. And God created all of it. And then there's another great book, I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. And this is an apologetics book that was pivotal in my becoming a Christian, to understand the finely tuned universe and how if a single thing were different in our entire atmosphere, or the tilt of the earth, or the distance from the sun, or the strength of gravity, if one thing were different, one of countless things were different, then it would be impossible to exist. Science, far from being an atheist pursuit, it's a pursuit that seeks to uncover and reveal God's creation. Just like Isaac Newton saw it. Innovation, it's like coming up with inventions and innovating, it's an act of creation that we engage in, just like God did in creating everything around us. I only got about 2 minutes, but I want to make this point really quick. I believe that the MAGA movement is at its core a movement of building and discovery. Marxism was created by a guy named Karl. Karl was a wretched creature, an awful person. When you know more about Karl, then Marxism makes sense, because Karl was all about death and destruction as a person. Therefore, Marxism reflects that. MAGA's core, if Trump was the beginning of the MAGA movement, Trump is a builder, first and foremost. So MAGA at its core is building as well. It is rooted in building. That's what MAGA is. It's about building and innovating and creating. We need more of that in this country. Now, there's going to be a little bit of destruction that needs to take place too, right? Like God told Gideon to tear down his father's altars. Judges 6:25, right? Take your father's bull and pull down the altar of Baal, cut down the Asherah that's beside it, and then build an altar to the Lord your God on top of that stronghold. Similarly, 2 Kings 23, King Josiah, when he discovered the law again, he ordered the tearing down of all the temples to Baal. He desecrated the areas dedicated to child sacrifice to Moloch, right? Tearing down the high places. You got to tear down sometimes before you can rebuild properly and righteously. Of course, the flood would be the ultimate example of that as well. Destruction can be righteous as long as we rebuild righteously to glorify God after. And that's what science and innovation is all about. And to me, space is the pinnacle of that, because it's everything we do. That's what Corinthians says, right? 1 Corinthians 10:31, whatever you're eating or drinking, doing, do it all to the glory of God. We have to get back to that in this country, that everything we do, everything we create, everything we innovate, everywhere we travel, even in space, is done for the glory of God, honoring him. MAGA and this American golden age is at its core a movement of building by builders. My podcast, Politics by Faith, you can listen to it anywhere you download podcasts. We do this every day. We take the news of the day, whatever's happening, run it through a biblical lens. There's nothing new under the sun. There's nothing new in the entire universe that God created. So this is our chance to understand the Bible even more. And hopefully, like Isaac Newton did in his pursuits, we can unveil who God is a little more, even through the news of the day. Politics by Faith is the name of the podcast, anywhere you listen to podcast. Mike Slater, The First TV. Spread the word.